Battlefield 2042. I remember when the trailer for this game dropped and how absolutely insane it looked. Seeing the epic, massive scale action with those classic, only in Battlefield moments. But if you head to the comments section on that trailer, you'll find comments such as my personal favorite being, "It's like watching your parents' wedding video after they divorced." Because when the game released in 2021, it was completely devoid of the Battlefield personality fans of the series had come to love. In retail stores, the game was quickly thrown in the discount bin, and the game would also become available on Xbox Game Pass a year later. So with reports that we won't likely get another Battlefield game until late 2025, I thought I'd go through Game Pass and give Battlefield 2042 a go and see if the game was any better in 2024. So at launch, a big problem firstly was stability. Games regularly crashing, huge frame drops and graphical glitches. I have to say here in 2024 that my game ran fairly smoothly. Playing on a PC with an i7 and a 3080 Ti, I was able to get to 130 frames per second at 1080p with ultra settings, and those same settings at 2K got me around 100 FPS. I can only think of one time when my game froze for a split second, so on the stability front for Battlefield 2042, I had no complaints. Now let's dive straight into the gameplay. If I had to describe my experience with 2042, I would say it was mediocre. Firstly, I appreciate that they have added in 64-player Conquest as opposed to the 128-player upgrade that the game arrived with at launch. 128 players was not just stressing the servers, but it was simply not fun because the game did not flow well. As you'll see in most of this gameplay, I'm the kind of player who loves the DMR in Battlefield, running around, slowly pushing up to hold a position where I can take enemies down at medium to long range. I personally find there are other games out there for picking up an SMG and going crazy. So here I like to take my targets down with a level of precision instead of pure aggression. 128 players did not really allow this kind of gameplay, and many in the community requested an option to play 64. So now that this is an option, I think it's fantastic. I'll say that alongside the map rework for the most part, it makes it an overall better experience. Previously, 2042 had an issue where despite having these massive maps specifically built for 128, there were no interest points between the capture zones. So all the players ended up getting locked into battles on just the zones, and there were huge empty fields of no man's land between them. Some maps have had some additions which help resolve this problem, but there was still something missing. You see, none of these maps really had a standout Battlefield moment where no sandstorm or tornado could rival moments like Battlefield 4's Siege of Shanghai, for instance. I find it a little shocking that in the 64-player Conquest mode they had to bring back older maps from previous Battlefield games, which to me is a little bit of a kick in the teeth. I don't have a problem with bringing old maps back in games, but I find sometimes it can be a bit of an admission that, hey, we made some new stuff, but this isn't as good as some of the classics, and we know that, so here's something older to actually keep you playing the game. The Portal mode exemplifies this problem, and I simply will not sit here saying you should go out and buy this game just to play a cut down version of a previous Battlefield game. That is ridiculous and unacceptable. Also on that note, what happened to Levolution? Battlefield maps previously had this idea that if I can't take that building, screw it, I'll just rip it down. By the end of a match, every building will be completely blown apart and unrecognizable, almost as if, I don't know, a battle took place on a battlefield. But in 2042, destruction is so watered down, I would say it is almost absent. There are a healthy choice of weapon options available in the game, which they've added over time, and with enough grinding and commitment, you can make a weapon of your own. I quickly found the DM7 to be my calling and got to doing what I enjoy doing best. But in comes the major problem with Battlefield 2042. The thing that was maybe one of the biggest complaints. Specialist. Battlefield traditionally, along with its all-out warfare mode Conquest and Levolution, it also has a robust class system: Assault, Engineer, Support, and Recon. When 2042 released, however, the classes were completely abandoned instead for a Specialist, each with their own gadgets and gear. This completely ruined 2042 for many people, myself included, because instead of playing within the confines of your class, you are picking from personalities whom of which you don't care about, and you can essentially mix and match gear and weapons to just about whoever you like. Breaking this class system ruined team play, as essentially everybody can become their own one-man army. Also, these personalities might work in a game like Black Ops 3, where each operator had their own defined purpose and specific circumstances in which they can be best utilized in such an arcade shooter. But in Battlefield, cheesy one-liners and flair is not something which makes sense when you are trying to communicate to the player that this is an all-out war in locations around the world. Each battle ideally should feel that there are consequences for not only both sides in the conflict, but environmental destruction, economic repercussions, and ripple effects across the world. Specialist to me is an artificial and synthetic way to try and touch on these consequences with cheesy one-liners. The gameplay alone should, and in the past has successfully done that. I didn't feel any connection to any specialist. Instead, I felt distaste, as they really shouldn't be there. If 2042 originally intended for me to identify with a backstory, they became nothing more than hated names on a menu screen. Thankfully, Battlefield 2042 has brought back the class system for the most part. However, the specialists are still present but are now grouped into different classes with some restrictions. Yet, this is not perfect for two reasons. One, regardless of the class or specialist, you can still use any weapon you like. Reduce mobility and effectiveness in close range fights with a DMR? Not at all. I can just take this position by grappling up with no worries whatsoever and now take a defensive post for my team. I really don't think this kind of gadget fits for this weapon. That is my opinion. I just feel it didn't really flow well with the gameplay. And the bigger problem comes down to a mechanic regarding weapon attachments. You still feel like a one-man army in Battlefield 2042 because of the ability to change your attachments on the fly. For instance, I can edit my DMR to have a short-range scope as well as lighter ammunition for closer engagements, or mid-game, heck, even mid-fight. I can edit the weapon on the fly by throwing longer barrels, scopes, and different ammo types. Basically, you can get two for the price of one, and there is no risk in any weapon you take. Building the ultimate long-range DMR should come at a cost. That cost maybe should involve weapon handling. You're going to have a longer barrel, you're going to have scopes suited to longer ranges, and you're probably going to have less ammo in your magazine due to a larger caliber size. However, the ability to edit on the fly takes away that risk entirely and ultimately doesn't aid that class system where previously you would need to support each other. The whole point of making this video was because a friend of mine asked if it was worth getting into, and I found myself reflecting if I honestly could see myself recommending this game. There was one game I played on a map called Stadium, which was set in Doha, Qatar. The game was memorable for a couple reasons. Firstly, like Operation Locker from Battlefield 4, this map, despite playing Conquest, was infantry only. No vehicles, so everybody was condensed into a tight packed area, trying to break through to the other side of the stadium. There were fierce firefights, smoke grenades, shielded turrets, snipers playing on the outskirts, picking people off trying to flank, and bold SMG runners getting cut down in the chaos. No team could make a breakthrough. It was a complete deadlock, and despite the endless killing and countless lives thrown in the hope of securing a football stadium as a strategic position, it genuinely felt that there were no winners at the end of this fight. Just like in any war, in any conflict, everybody loses. I spent most of my game in the heart of the action, reviving my teammates, dropping medkits, just trying to gain 10 meters of territory, and it was easily by far the most fun I had in my entire experience. Every single other game I played felt average because of the simple fact that previous Battlefield games did it better. Battlefield 4 really forced me to find my own weapon and class, balancing the risks and rewards on maps which were completely destroyed by the end of it. Battlefield 1 lacked customization, but the conflict felt raw, screams of fallen comrades running over the trenches, weapons covered in mud and grit after wading through a ruined no man's land. I often reflected on my ancestors who fought in the First World War, and I wondered if maybe perhaps those emotions that my player felt in this game, were they feeling that same sort of thing? Battlefield 2042 at no point sparked any emotion. It didn't live up to any of those moments. A half-baked class system, maps lacking the classic Levolution. There was no team play in any of my games, and the only time I saw any team chat was when nobody had any anti-air in one of my matches and someone made their feelings very, very clear about it. Battlefield 2042 released in a terrible state, and I'm glad to have seen it come a long way, but it still fails to meet the expectations and hit those only in Battlefield moments. Long wait times don't help either, as the player counts are even lower than Battlefield 5 at the time of recording. If Battlefield 2042 released as I played it today, I think it would have been received very differently. But ultimately, it has taken too long to become a very average and forgettable Battlefield experience. Can I recommend revisiting this game? Well, currently on Steam, it will set you back the full price of $60, and for my Australian audience, that will cost you $90. Please do not fork out this amount to play an average game. If you happen to have an EA Play subscription, or a much more likely Game Pass subscription through Xbox or PC, then you can already access this game for no extra cost. And I think at that point, and only at that point, I would say it's worth a try given you already have access to the game. Battlefield 2042 in 2024 is a playable shooter that, despite being played on epic-sized maps, only meets the most mediocre of expectations. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this revisit, please leave a like and comment on your thoughts and opinions on Battlefield 2042. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss another video. Lancey out.